For people living along its shores, Africa's Lake Victoria is a constant presence and a source of joy and livelihood. So when Kenya native Rahmina Paullete noticed that the lake was being overrun by pollution, plastic and invasive water hyacinth, she decided to take action. She harvested the invasive plant, transforming it into furniture, coasters and bags, and she launched the campaign Let Lake Victoria Breathe Again to fight for the cleanup and protection of the ecosystem. Well, we're honoured to have her join us in studio this morning. Rahmina, thank you so much for being with us here on the programme. Firstly, can you start just by telling us a little bit more about how your own journey as an activist began?
Well, I could say that my activism started in 2020. And this was mainly because of the diverse and vast effects of the climate crisis that was still continuing, and the limited action that was being taken by the government in terms of policy implementation. That's when I started saying that why not become an activist and raise a voice? Yes, I was an environmentalist when I started at 5 years old and started launching projects. But at the end of the day, we're still trying to connect these gaps that we have within the system.
And talk to us then about Lake Victoria. What or who is responsible for the pollution there?
Well, first of all, I'd like to recognize that Lake Victoria is one of the most important ecosystems in the entire world, and it is directly connected to me because I have an ancestral background in it. So with the pollution, mainly is the multinational companies that are settling within the wetlands and are kind of polluting the environment through the production of plastics. The multinational companies are very known quite all over the world. I won't mention the name because I might put my life at risk, but it is one of the most key contributors towards the pollution.
And in terms of that pollution then, are you managing to make any headway in cleaning up the waters of the lake?
Yeah, well, of course, done community engagement within these Lake Victoria region in Kenya, but we're hoping to spread within the East African region, the Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, through having more resources that we could use for the cleanups. For example, us as young youths, since most of us are youths and young people like teenagers, we do not have a way of sustaining ourselves. We don't have jobs. So what we normally do is we do fundraising so that people can be able to chip in so that we can clean up the lake. We clean up the lake in different ways. First, we have the rivers. We also have the roads. And most of the times, people usually tend to forget that the basic things that they are doing are the ones that are creating this loss. For us, we also try to create awareness to the community and tell them that as much as the multinational companies are the ones who are polluting the most, they're supposed to be coming in and saying that it is our lake. We're drinking the water directly. Some of us are drinking the water directly, like the community that I come from, and seeing that every day, like more than 50% of the fish inside the lake are dying because of these single-use plastics, the microplastics, and even the chemicals that are being introduced by the multinational companies.
And you've also been quite active outside Africa as well. I believe you were in Germany recently where environmental activists were gathering. That there was a town there, Lutzera, it's going to be essentially eradicated to make way for the extension of a coaling mine. Was it important, and why, for you to be there?
Well, it's important for my presence there as being in solidarity with the activists who are trying to defend the place and trying to stop the more coal mines that are leading towards a destruction of our own future. And since I am also a climate migrant, I was affected by the floods in Lake Victoria, and I could connect with the people from the village, the communities who are trying to advocate for the place and trying to like bring in system change within this whole place. And you know very well that within the climate crisis, we have one of the most contributors, and that is from the fossil fuel industry. and they are taking advantage of the young people who are trying to come up with different ways so that they could stop what they are doing. Right now they're investing in more coal mines. Even, for example, you could look at Democratic Republic of Congo. There's a lot of mining taking place, and we are one of the people, like in the region of Africa, we're the ones who are actually really affected by the climate crisis. So I felt it was the need of me to take part in this Lutzerat march, because we have a lot of connections within the all climate space, and being with one of the most influential climate activists, which is Greta Thunberg, as one of the spearheads of the voices of MAPA. I think it's really crucial for us to work together and say that we need not only a systems change, but you also need people to come up and say that they want a sustainable future.
And you've mentioned how, you yourself are impacted by climate change. We hear a lot about Greta. Yeah, you say she was in Germany last week as well. But do you think we're hearing enough from African voices when it comes to talking about climate change and what can be done to tackle it?
Well, first of all, I'd like to say the westernized media normally try to block most of the times the kind of information on the African and even Asian news on climate and the climate change. Like, for example, we had the floods in Sudan and the floods in Sierra Leone that wasn't much covered. So when you look at even how they are promoting greenwashing with the fossil fuel industry, they'd be like, this amount of money is towards solar panels, it's towards a climate project, but yet there are other banks that are trying to kind of give back to the society, but yet they're the ones who are saying that we need to come up with different ways, but they're the ones who are foiling these fossil fuel industries. Then I think from the question that you had asked, we are not being heard at all, the African activists. In most of the times we are usually victims of tokenism. So whenever we also try to speak, there'll be a lot of sarcasm within the system. It'd be like, this person is from this place and doesn't deserve to talk that much. So most of this focus is towards the European activists. Yes, I know they're doing a lot in terms of advocating online, but our voices are the ones that are being depleted. So we normally tend to go to COPs to create a system change. We are going there to fight for loss and damage finance and other things, but yet we are not being heard. We're not being listened to.
You mentioned COP there as well. Were you satisfied with the result, what we saw agreed there or not agreed at last year's summit?
Well, actually, I have a mixed reaction on that. Well, first of all, I think I'm really happy that that loss and damage finance was agreed upon. But the question is, what about the climate adaptation finance? I know you're asking yourself, why am I more strategic on the finance? It's because one of the most key components of the climate crisis solution is the finances. Like, if you look at the global south countries, then the developing countries and developing countries like Kenya, for instance, we don't have the amount of resources that we need to get an impact, make an impact to the society, and even like try to finance our own climate projects. Then the main question about these COP27, we go there to all these kind of COPs, but yet we find children and youth not present. When you're talking about inclusivity also of the indigenous people, well, I was quite happy that we had the Children Youth Pavilion. That was the ever first in all the COPs. But the problem was there were youths and children, but just sitting inside the Children Youth Pavilion, having no task to do. So what are we trying to change within the COP system? Even next year, COP28 will be spearheaded by one of the most people who are the most rich. This guy, who will be the president of the COP28, he's the one who has a lot of funding schemes on the fossil fuel industry. So it's quite unfortunate that you have to live up to that, even when you're speaking about trying to drive the change, but yet we have people who are setting us back.
In Dubai, you're referring to there. Rahmina, we'll have to leave it there, but thank you so much for coming into studio and speaking with us this morning here at France 24. That is Rahmina Paullete, Kenyan climate activist and conservationist.